Welcome to Moving Iron with Casey Seymour and Greg Peterson, the podcast for anyone and everyone involved and interested in the business of ag equipment. If you want to understand what trends and market forces are impacting the price of your iron, you've come to the right place. Buckle up, it's time to move some iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. I got Greg Machinery, Pete Peterson on to talk about what's happening in the world of the marketplace of used equipment. I also want to thank John Deere for sponsoring this edition of Moving Iron Podcast. Greg, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Casey. How are you?
Doing good, man. Doing real good. We had a full-fledged here of what's going on in the wheat marketplace. We see, obviously, wheat harvest has started in Texas, making its way north. Had a chance to walk across the Kansas countryside and looked at a lot of wheat fields out there, and they're on pace to make their normal, late or mid to late June start and go from there. But it was things look good out there, so the wheat looked like it was in good shape. So we'll be interested to see how this year's harvest takes place.
You guys have had some rain out your way out in western central U.S.?
Yeah, we've had that stretch out there has been. So I grew up around Wichita, Kansas. So of course, I get a weather report every time I call home. But it's been dry for the past. Man, it feels like the last 3 to 5 years. It feels like it's just been hit or miss on the moisture down there, and they've gotten a lot of really good rain here of late. And even out here in the Panhandle, Nebraska, we've gotten pretty much a year's worth of rain in the last 2 weeks, which is very uncommon to get those kind of rains. Had a good rain last night. So we're getting the rains coming in. We get the blast of heat that come with them right afterwards, and then it cools back off. So hopefully that pattern doesn't stick around all summer long. But we're in a good spot as far as moisture goes for us.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We cover such an area, all of North America, doing what we do, covering the used market. You always see different stress points. I know down in the Southeast, Texas on over, the cotton country, I know they're really struggling. One with the market, but then two, now Mother Nature's been piling on. So, we take the timely rains and heat when we can get it, and are thankful for that. But every year's a new challenge, isn't it?
That's always a new challenge, man. It's one of the few professions in the world where you have no idea what's going to happen by the time after you plant your crop.
No, faith is inherent in agriculture.
Yep, very much so.
That's just life. Put your seed in the ground and be patient and wait. And it's been interesting over 35 years watching, analyzing data on how and when people spend on used equipment. And I always kind of thought, kind of upper Midwest boy here in Minnesota, but you get to this point of year, okay, crops in the ground up here. Now is it going to be dry? Is it going to be too wet? It's hot, too cold? We don't know. It's out of our control.
Yep.
So I would the auction price data back when I started in the late 80s through the 90s, kind of before the internet was really going, it always seemed to me like auction pricing would back off a bit until you had some type of vision like, okay, this crop's looking good, prices are going to be whatever. But that's kind of not the thing it used to be. We're living in a different world now with information and the internet and everything. So online auctions, the whole bit.
Yep, for sure. Well, when we got started, you had some combine data you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, kind of interesting. One of the things here in 2025 on combines are definitely showing up and across also into tractors and basically anything with an engine. But we're seeing stronger auction pricing on slightly older machines. Not surprising when times are difficult and belts are being tightened across ag country. But the used combine market, we've talked about it a number of times, Casey. We started to see the used combine market adjust first in this current, I guess you'd say, downturn. I started to see December of 22, the volume on dealer lots was pretty high and auction pricing started to get lower, while the rest of the auction market was very strong. So, I've been saying the used combine market is 12 to 18 months ahead of the high horse used tractor market. And it's interesting right now, if you look at combines, a couple common ones like a John Deere S780, average auction price right now is $257,000, just under $257,900. and average dealer ad price is, just under 433. So when we do the math on our machine repeat ratio, which is pretty simple, average auction price divided by average dealer ad price, that comes in at 59.6%, which is, you get under 60, and now you're drifting towards what I saw a decade ago. Now that's on the S7, on S700 series, a larger model. The slightly older model is doing a little better. So if we look at an S670 right now, I know last Wednesday our friends at Sullivan and Big Iron had one on an auction out of Oklahoma. It was a farm retirement auction out of Forgan, Oklahoma, which I don't know where that is in Oklahoma, but they had a 16 model S670 with 2,806 engine hours that came in at $80,750, which is right about the average. Average auction price so far this year on an S670 is at $82,723. And it's really interesting, Casey, when you look at an S670, if we look at the average auction price. So again, right now, $82,723. Last year it was $80,924. So that S670 is actually gone up 2.2%. Not a lot, but is this footing on older models? This is kind of what we're seeing, whether it's tractors, but again, combines are a year ahead. If we wound that back a bit to show you how much those dropped the previous 2 years on an S670, in 2022, average auction price was $132,200. And then in 23, it dropped to basically $100,900. So it dropped 23.7% in 23. Then it dropped another 20% last year in 24 on an S670. And now all of a sudden we're 2.2% higher. Now the biggest driver in that is the number sold, which is way off from last year and from 23 so far anyway. We'll see what happens the rest of 25, but the volume was down. And we see the same thing, on late model tractors. There just haven't been as many sold at auction.
Yep.
But again, these older ones are holding their value a little better. That's the bottom line.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's the key point that you're talking about there when you're looking at where things are at. As you watch the marketplace kind of meander its way through, where we're stable, or kind of where we're stabilizing at, there's not a lot of. I don't want to say not a lot of. That's not accurate, but there's still plenty of auction activity when you start looking at what dealerships are doing, those kind of things. There's still guys taking stuff, but it's not the, hey, we're going to drop 30 combines and 50 tractors through a one-day sell. It's onesie twosie stuff kind of working their way through.
Right.
Now, I don't know what your thought is. My thought is there's going to be some significant activity. I'm going to say late. I think people are talking about auctions now for that September, October timeframe, and on through that. Do you feel the same way? And have you heard any rumblings from the auction folks you're talking with?
No, I agree exactly, Casey. And some of it, again, 35 years doing this, June 1st has always been I call it a buoy in the water. So to me, dealers take a breath. I wouldn't say I'm worried, but I think looking at our data right now, if I was a dealer, I may have wished I pushed some of this auction activity into early 25, because frankly, the pricing has been better than I thought.
Right.
Like I say, that's just the way it is. Now, that's because there haven't been as many out there. Now, we understand why dealers hit the pause button, because they were so aggressive last year on tractors in particular, but 2 years on combines. So we'll see. But maybe those rains you're talking about out your way. And, who knows? You can't control the factors. And looking backwards is kind of a fool's errand. We can't live our life looking in the rearview mirror. We can look for insight, which is what we hope our data can provide, but you just make the best decisions you can going forward. But I think, get your take on it, but dealers, obviously the level of inventory is still higher than they want, but if we would wind it back 12 months and compare it to where we were June of 24, this time last year, we were starting to see some really big auctions with just loads and loads of dealer stuff starting to pile up all over.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest issue right now, and this is just me talking So take it for what it's worth. But as I'm looking at the situation that we're in across the board, whether you're a buyer of used equipment or a seller of used equipment, if you've got something sitting on your lot or in your barn or on your whatever, right? You're paying 6.5% interest for that to be there, right? Whether you own it or whether you own it on the floor plan, right? So I think all those things are all the situation we're going through. It feels like the biggest bulk of the auction activity we saw happen really, I think, got some people back into a good spot with their inventory. But the problem with that is they're still paying 6.5% on that inventory that's sitting there. And that's the driving factor. I think this issue that I think a lot of folks were hoping that we get to a certain point and then we start seeing activity pick up, which we're starting to see that activity pick up, but it's just not fast enough. That flywheel's not turning fast enough yet. It's just starting to kind of turn over a little bit right now.
Right.
And that speed, that velocity that the dealerships are looking for is just not there yet. And it's causing some of them to step back and take a look at what they're doing and like, okay, we have to do this again. And that's why I think that last push into that last quarter of the year, last half of the third quarter, into the typical auction stuff that you see happening, move forward there. Now, just like you talked about, that June 1st time frame was always when I was sitting in the used equipment seat, June 1st got there, I looked at it as two different seasons, right? You had the first half of the year, the second half of the year, and they're pretty much different, right? I mean, you had any money that was I can't remember the word I'm looking for here, pushing into the next year so they can make purchases for tax reasons. That all got taken place basically January, February, maybe into March, but depending on what it was. And that kind of hemmed that up there. As you looked at second half of the year, that was buying patterns based around, okay, we feel like we're going to have a good crop. The markets, we've marketed well. We've done the things we're going to do. So, okay, so now we're going to start looking like we can start spending some money or start having those conversations about what we're going to do for tax planning purposes towards the end of the year, right? So two different dynamics there. The auctions that I saw take place in that June timeframe were an oddity, number one, because you didn't see it very often, but they were probably planned back in March and April timeframe, and they were, okay, we've had 60 days to talk about this, now we're going to do this, which I always found June, July timeframe to be a kind of an active period because, again, spring harvest has come in, planning's been done, those kind of things have taken place. Everyone kind of knows where they're at. When you start watching those things take place, that's when I started thinking about, okay, here's the activity you see now. If you had good, strong activity after June 1st, that typically carried through the end of the year. After June 1st, if there wasn't good activity, you're on a desert island out there and you were going to have a hard time building that momentum into the end of the year unless something amazing happened. And that was, I hated betting on the come that there's going to be a strong harvest in September, October, November timeframe to get that December push. And that was where I was. So I paid attention to what happened in June and July. If I felt like there was a good book of business being built in and a lot of activity that typically carried through the end of the year. And I think this year, it feels like we're seeing some of that momentum start to build here June, July with the buying public, but the velocity of which dealerships need to get that flywheel turning, it's just slower than what they think, and I think it's going to result in some bigger end of the year sales. The
velocity you're talking about, that's interesting, Casey, because I've heard dealers I'm yakking with sort of the same thing. It is really hard to generalize across the board, right? Because we're talking such different geographies and different focuses. But generally speaking, that's what I've been hearing too. Like disappointed, pushing first half of the year here, we're through that the items off the used lot haven't been moving as quick as they'd hoped. But what you described that's kind of what that cycle I've been talking about for 3.5 decades in my chair is that approaching middle of the year on the dealer side going, okay, where are we at? Interest rate is what it is. What are our options? What's our attack plan going forward? It's interesting. One thing I've always, again, looking at this hard cash auction price data, I've always sort of felt it's better to be in the front of the line than the back of the line through all these different cycles. So it's tough to lead into an uncertain market But sometimes if you hang back and wait, I mean, sometimes you can be rewarded for that. The old Apple approach, not be first to market, but come later. That's on a new product. Come later and do it better. But when you're dealing with, in essence, a commodity of all these used combines or tractors or whatever, that's where being late. Again, I always think of all those buyers that are already out of the market.
Yeah.
That bought in maybe July, or so we see some of these big consignment dealer auction where you get 10, 15 dealers piling stuff in July versus August or September. So every year is different, fascinating. But again, I think there's beginning to be at least, some hopeful signs like that. That's why I brought forward that S670 data. Again, now if depends on how you look at it. I mean, if you're a farmer and you might go, if in your head you're thinking 2 years ago, the average price, Machine Repeat said 2 years ago was, $132,000 back in 22. Well, this ain't 2022 anymore, is it? So now the average price is 82,000, but last year it was 80. So
yeah,
a bit of footing there, which is better than the alternative.
Yeah. And I think you're exactly to your point, is that we've hit a stabilization point, right? My thing with the stabilization point that we're in now, that I've had a lot of conversations about this. I'm not convinced that if we see a big auction push at the end of the year, I'm not convinced that it fluctuates the pricing that much. Because when you start down the path, when everything's up here and you start having these auctions, it chips away, to where it gets to a point to where everyone just, okay, cool, I'm good with that. I'm good with that pricing. We go from there. I don't think that the pricing is going to go. We're going to see a huge uptick in pricing, but I don't think we're going to see a huge downtick in pricing. So I think we're seeing the stabilization point that this is the fair market value for the equipment at the auction as we push things through. And I feel like it's going to stay the same. Now I could be wrong on that, but that's my thought.
That's that opinion is sort of. I would have to say. I mean, reading our tea leaves and our data, not just tea leaves. I mean, that's just a saying, but data is what I've hung my head on for 35 years. So if we compare back to the last downturn, which was, basically late spring, early summer of 13, when the last, and that took 2 3/4 years until the auction pricing found that footing, like I just described with S670s.
Yeah.
Now, this time around, I was writing about this in advance 4 years ago, basically after the pandemic. Is like, this is a different world than a decade ago.
Right.
For a number of reasons. On the dealer front, there's way fewer dealers. They're way bigger. They're capitalized different. So they're able to, it's every bit as painful, but they're able to absorb these losses better than if you had 2 or 4 stores.
Right.
So there's that. But then even more importantly was what's happened with these online auctions. We've talked about it a lot, but just the fact that when you do, like you said before, drib or drab, 3 or 4 year combines or 4 year tractors as a dealer out to an auction, now your buying pool there's no fence to it. They're from everywhere. And that's helped a lot. So last downturn, 2 3/4 years until we found footing. This year, we could argue on the starting point. For combines, let's just say January 1st of 23, and here we are, 2 years, and we found footing. Now, 2 is less than 2 3/4.
Right.
But I've been, like I said before, I think the used combine market is a year and a half ahead of the tractor market. So if we do the Machine Repeat ratio on, some later model tractors right now, for example, we talked about it before, but I don't want to say pick on it. We just see so many of them, the 8R series. An 8R 410 right now, the Machine Repeat ratio is 76.1%. Now, I don't think it's going to go as low as combines down, to 60%, low 60s, but is it going to hold at 76% or is it going to slide a little more? We'll have to wait and see. But I think this downturn, I said it going into the downturn that I think it'll be shorter than the last downturn, 2 3/4.
Shorter and sharper, yeah.
Shorter and sharper, exactly.
Yep.
And that's sort of what's looking like it's starting to play out.
Yep. And I agree with what you're saying. So you have the way I do the same thing you're doing. I just flip the numbers around. So yep. I just do it from retail price as the numerator and auction price as the denominator. So it kind of give you the ratio that you're looking for there. But typically when you look at combines, I've only seen one time in my career, and I've been through 2 or 3 of these downturns now, where combine prices were, like I said, I want my retail value to be 120% auction value. I've only seen one time when combines did that. It was for a very brief, short amount of time coming out of 2016 into 2017. Combine values were in that like 115 to 117 range, but it didn't take long before it was back to like about where it is now, right?
Yeah.
Auction value on combines is, it's like, it's like beating the dead horse on a combine, right? Combines are the second most important thing on a farm, right? Because before you can use a combine, you got to have a planter, right? So you got a planter is probably the most important thing, because that's just, you got to plant the crop before you can harvest it. But combines are a tough sell at an auction, and they always have been, and they always will be. And that's just how that works, because you don't know what you're buying when you buy a combine, right? There's so many moving parts. You can have all the inspection stuff, you can do all the stuff you can, but there's so many gearboxes and so many this and so many that you never really know, right? And I think that's kind of some of the driving factor behind that. Also, guys are also figuring in, if I'm going to have to spend X number of dollars to get this machine ready to go to the field.
Right.
Even if it's used, and even if it's been through the shop, right? That's my favorite thing. It's been through the shop, right?
Right.
How fast did it go through the shop? That's
how
what was
fast did it go through? Yes. Well, it's interesting that that. Let's just again go back to the example on the S670. Now, of course, the S600 series was made from 12 to 17, so you're talking 8 to 13 years old now.
Yep.
So that one in Oklahoma last Wednesday with a 16 model with 2,806 engine hours, and it was part of a farm retirement sale, so it wasn't floating just like one-off combine in a Big Irons weekly sale with 1,000 pieces. It was actually Max Hulling's online retirement auction within that sale, so that helped it. But 80,750 now. Again, even though dollars are really tight for farmers, I think those numbers have fallen far enough from 2-3 years ago. But now you're starting to get maybe some action that, like, I wasn't necessarily looking for one, but if I can get Max's nice one for 80,750, and again, that's why we see average auction price up 2.2% this year. So it's fascinating, isn't it? It's all connected. Yeah. So you and I, we run across anecdotal information in a lot of ways. Basically, people. We're in the people business and data. Right. So you and I, we play a little golf. I was golfing last week, and I'm old. I was walking up this hill on the 8th hole at my course here in Rochester, and I'm huffing and puffing. And I see on the 9th hole coming down the hill is my friend Dan, an ag lender I've known for 30 years, just maybe 30, 40 miles outside of Rochester. Great guy. I trudged my way over. I'm like, Dan, how you doing, man? We had a good little chat, and I said, how are your customers feeling? And he said, they're pretty positive. And we talked just a little bit, because we didn't want to hold up the group behind us. But basically, we sort of arrived at, the reality that there's some still really strong balance sheets, but increasing pressure on the younger producers.
Yeah.
So you get this duality going on that's can be frustrating if you're a younger farmer and you see those 8R410s I talked about, and you still see a 76.1% machine repeat ratio. You're like, why haven't they fallen more at auction? Well, that's because there's, more guys my age and up that, through the good years have stronger balance sheets, and they're just have been a little bit more aggressive. So I guess it's kind of like our culture in general. There's this kind of haves and have nots, and it's not right or wrong. It just is what it is, right?
Yep, for sure. Yeah. And I'm hearing the same thing. It's the older operations that have more generational capital and those kind of things are the guys that are not like they're in great shape by any means, but they're better off than the guys that are trying to pull both ends together and tie it off in the middle. So
I did hear, I have to share this on our Machine Repeat social media, hopefully today, Casey, but I was, perusing all our information yesterday, and there was a story, Minnesota Public Radio up here, a very good reporting network. They put out a story think the farmer was up in northwest Minnesota, a guy kind of my age, upper 50s. He was retiring, but rather than like, I don't think he had kids in the family, but what he was doing, rather than just having an auction, was with his land, his machinery, he selected 5 young farmers, like from like 25 to 35.
Yeah.
And he said he'd been kind of watching, as we do in the small communities, you pay attention, who's a good community guy, operator, whatever. And he divvied up the land. They each got like 1,000 acres. And these guys, it's tough to get land. And so anyway, I just wanted to, I'll share that out there.
Yeah.
But fun to see things like that.
You're seeing more and more of that.
But I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, very interesting concept. You've seen more and more of that pop up across the spectrum as less people are coming back into operation. So for sure. So, well, Greg's probably a good place to stop. Best place for people wanting to come out and get you to come speak at their thing. Just go to missionarypete.com and hit the contact button.
Yep. Just hit the website, a little button on the bottom, and I'll send a note into our office. And again, I think I mentioned it in our last week, Casey, but if you are looking for a good auction to go to, an old-fashioned auction in person, we are going to be filming Saturday, June 21st in Lime Springs, Iowa. Sale by Joel's Tractors and Auctions, and it's got some just really, really low-hour John Deere stuff. So looking forward to getting out to that one. Should be fun.
Yeah, I haven't been to a live auction in a long time. I love going to those things. It's always fun.
Well, they're fun. They're good for the soul.
Yeah.
It's good for us to put our phones down and talk to each other. And and that is still what I like most about the auction business, is the people part of it.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Well, good deal. Well, Greg, appreciate you being on the podcast. If you're interested to come to the Moving Iron Summit in Austin, Texas, check that out. Sign-ups open. That's September 24th through 26th. You can go do all that stuff, and well worth your time if you're a dealership guy. I want to come talk about and hang out and talk about what's going on in the marketplace. It's a great place to do it. So come check that out, and we'll be there. So with that, stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcasts after these messages.
Looking for more accuracy, more productivity from your current planter? Let's get exact with precision upgrades from John Deere. Start with Exact Emerge and get accurate singulation and spacing at 10 miles per hour. Or choose Exact Shot to promote early root growth and cut fertilizer costs. And with Furrow Vision, save time by verifying seed depth right from your cab. Visit johndeere.com/planner upgrades and see why nothing runs like a Deere.
All right, welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. Mark with Sean Hackett. Sean Hackett is with Hackett Financial out of Boca Raton, Florida, and he's nice enough to come on and talk about what's happening in the world of commodities. Sean, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. Back from vacation, ready to hit the Northern Hemisphere growing season with full force. Hopefully looking for some good opportunities to cash, sell, recommend rallies for producers. So,
right on. There is feels like we've hit a bit of a stagnation of the market here a little bit. The report you put out yesterday talked a lot about, hey, there's not a lot going on in the weather that could spur what's the markets to be really move any kind of movement at all, and they're waiting on something else to do that, Sean. So I guess as you're looking at things that are in the bag of tricks here, what are you looking at right now that could help make the market move?
I mean, let's just put things into context. There's usually nothing to worry about here in late May, early June, ever. The crop always gets planted, and it always comes out, and the market's always feeling it's going to be a good crop. I mean, rarely is the market not feeling that this time of the year. So having nothing, having the market feeling negative right now is pretty normal. Now what we normally have happen, normally you tend to have a dry spring that carries over into June. We've got a lot of hot Junes over the last 20 years. Gets the market excited. We get a rally into late June, and then July turns good. The market breaks hard, and then we get our harvest lows in August, September. That's your normal seasonal pattern. That's not what's happening this year. We're doing we're doing opposite. We made a high in February, March, which we normally don't do. We've corrected into the end of May because we haven't had any hot, dry weather. we're not likely going to have any hot, dry weather until the beginning, until we get to the end of June. And then the hot, dry, wet month is going to be the month of July. So I see so many people talking about the seasonality and, we need to get everything sold here because if you don't get it sold, understand that we've been doing opposite the seasonals. So understand when the seasonals are running true and understand when the seasonals are not running true. In the years that the seasonals are not running true, they continue not to run true. So take the seasonals and put them off to the side and they're not in operation this year. If they were in operation, then we would not have made our highs in February, March. We wouldn't have done that. So understand when to pay attention to that and not. The way our weather forecast has gone, or the way it looks to us and what we've been talking about for months, July this year is going to be your problem month. Finally, July is going to be a problem month this year. Every other year in the last 5 years, every other year in the last 20 years, except for 2012, we've had bad May, Junes, bad August, Septembers, but July's been good. Okay? This year, May and June is good. I think August, September, or let's say mid-August, is going to be okay. July is going to be the problem month, which means your seasonal, your price pattern. Look, prices over the growing season are driven by the weather. What normally the weather does, which means to me is a rally from late June into mid-late July is what's likely to occur this year. How high, for how long, obviously it depends upon how hot, how dry, for how long, and these other mitigating factors that we continue to watch day to day, which is the trade war, which is renewable diesel mandates, and geopolitics. That's what really we're at. So my view is that we're flat on our back. Grain markets are just gonna kind of sit here, grind sideways like they've been doing. And then I think we're going to get a rally that will be worth selling into for new crop corn, new crop soybeans, and typically for winter wheat, we're going to start harvesting the crop here. And usually when you start harvesting the crop, and once you get past 25% of harvest, then the market then has a post-harvest rally, which would occur around late June into July. So everything says to me, all my weather work, all my cycle work, everything, the way things are set up, when is the 90-day reprieve on tariffs supposed to come due? I think it's the end of June, I think, right?
Yeah.
So he has to cut some deals. He just has to. He can't go to the end of the 90 days and say, I couldn't do anything. I didn't get anything done. We're going back to 150%, especially when the courts are saying he can't do it anymore. So something probably good is going to happen. At least something good is going to happen. So everything says look for a rally later in the month into mid-late July, opposite of what you would normally expect in a normal year. In the meantime, I just don't see anything to drive the market. The only thing I can see driving the market here, Casey, which drove the markets yesterday, is what appears. There's an ongoing concept that when President Trump came in, we were going to have immediate peace with Russia, Ukraine, and the Middle East, and everything is going to go back, get resolved, and we're going to go back to loving each other again. And it's not happening. The negotiations aren't going well. They haven't moved the ball forward, and both sides continue to attack each other more aggressively. The latest being Ukraine's, I think it's the biggest drone attack on Russia ever.
Yeah.
At a time that they're supposedly, trying to work out a peace agreement. So it looks to me like we're going the other way. Like we're not actually getting things resolved. We're going to actually escalate this war again. And yeah, I'm trying to remember the last time that we saw gold, silver, crude oil, natural gas, wheat, palladium, all these things that are very sensitive to Russia and Ukraine, all up on the same day due to geopolitics. It's been a long time that we had that happen. Now, that doesn't mean that that the market's convinced of this yet, but that was a big reaction. And I think there's more to it. If I were to think about a catalyst that could drive grain markets higher before the end of June when weather comes back into the fray, I think it's going to be geopolitics. I don't see anything else until we get to the end of June. Other factors that are likely to impact ag markets in general in July and August are going to be a developing severe drought in India. I'm thinking sugar. I'm thinking rice. I'm thinking cotton. Also a developing escalating drought in China. Obviously, soybeans, corn, would be would be highly sensitive to that. But once again, that's all July and August. So I just think that when I'm thinking this out loud now, that means there's a good opportunity for buyers, physical buyers of these markets, to be looking for this next couple of weeks as their final chance to get some good things purchased before we might get a very significant substantive rally in the month of July, maybe carrying over into the first half of August. That's what I would be thinking about. Because once you get further into the year, they're going to raise renewable diesel standards. We're just trying to determine by how much, but they're going to do that. There's nothing negative about that. That's a positive thing for soybeans. It's a positive situation for more soybean acres in the next year. It's a positive situation for less corn acres next year. It's a positive development. Within that, there's going to be some increased usage for corn for ethanol, and some increased usage for corn for also for renewable diesel. There's also a feedstock that comes from that. When I'm thinking, there's going to be trade deals. I don't know if with who and how much and whether it's long term, but there's going to be something that says people are going to buy some more stuff from us for a little while, even if it's only for 6 to 12 months. I don't believe he can go into the midterm elections saying I cut no deals with anybody on my tariff strategy. He has to show that he succeeded in cutting trade deals. He has to, or else he's going to lose the Senate, he's going to lose the House, and he's basically toast for the rest of his presidency. And I don't believe he envisions that that's the way he wants to go down. You know what I'm saying? So logically, he's got to do it. He has to do it, in my opinion. So when I'm looking at all that, what could be the situation, Casey, in late June, in late July, early August, we could have trade deals maybe with China. We could have renewable diesel standards raised at least to 4.5 billion gallons or more. We could have escalating geopolitics. The dollar continues to be under pressure, which is always positive for selling more stuff and for higher U.S.-based prices. And we could have crops that are right now the market's guaranteeing trend line yields for grains. It's done. It's in the bin already. And my view is that the way our assessment is that we're going to have modestly below trend line yields again for the 6th year in a row. Nothing terrible, but right now the market's banking on 181, 182, 50, 52 yield on soybeans. It's done. It's guaranteed. And I'm thinking 50 on soybeans, maybe 178 on corn. And you know what though? You push those yields down just a little bit, and you increase the demand up just a little bit, and all of a sudden, soybeans, you're in demand rationing mode on soybean yield, and on corn at 1.8 billion carryout that the USDA is currently at, for next year. You bring yields to 178, you're 1.4. Well, that's barely enough, just enough. And if there's a trade deal that, what I'm saying is, I'm not sure I'm not sure you're necessarily going to get a much better price at harvest time than you're getting right now. So and with all that uncertainty to the upside in going forward, that could explode the markets much more than I'm suggesting right now. Always trying to be conservative. Why would you mess with it? I would take the getting when the getting is good. You have the markets, sitting here at the bottom. No one's bullish. You have an ability to buy stuff right now because there's people that have to sell. I just think it's a good opportunity for the livestock industry, for the ethanol industry, for the renewable diesel industry. Those on the physical buy side. I think this is an opportunity in the midst of all this uncertainty to get something smart done. That's the way I look at things. Always contrarian, of course. Everyone thinks markets are going lower forever right now, but Casey, as long as we've been doing this show, whenever the market, it's a guaranteed trade, make money onto the downside, inevitably you get a surprise rally that no one foresaw, and then everyone tells you why you should have bought the market now a month from now. And my job is to tell you what I think is best to do now before it's obvious what you ought to be doing. So,
Yep, for sure. There's always been this sense of doom and gloom, and here we sit now with the doom and the gloom, and just like you said, it's going to be like this forever.
August of last year, gloom and doom. Corn at 385, going to 3. Everyone's got to sell their corn, and of course, a couple months later, we're at 5.25. I mean, it's just the way the market's job. I always say, from a hedging perspective and a trading perspective and a speculative perspective, the market's job is to make the most amount of people make the wrong decisions as possible, and only let a few people actually make the right decisions. And my job is to try to do my best to try to steer my customers and those watching your show to be in that group that make the right decisions. And the only way you make the right decisions is you have to know when to go against the grain, no pun intended. And I believe this is one of those times.
Yep. I like that, though. Against the grain. That was a good one. That was a good one.
Got a little humor. I mean, look, I understand it's a serious situation, and farmers are not in a great spot. And I'm not trying to poke fun at anything, but you do have to laugh at life a little bit. You can't take it too seriously, or else you wind up, needing a shrink forever. And I don't think anybody wants to do that. So
no, for sure. All right. One other thing I want to talk about real quick, and we've talked about this in the past, based around solar cycles and what we see happen here, but there has been a significant uptick in the number of the amount of volcanic activity that's going on around the world. We saw one, and they've all been small. It's nothing crazy, but we did see one erupt on Sicily a couple days ago. There is 3 active volcanoes anyway that have the opportunity to erupt in the United States. Obviously, there's no predictability as to when that'll happen, but we are seeing some movement with that. When you look at what you've got here, you've got Mount Spur in Alaska, the Axial Seamount underwater volcano off of Oregon that we talked about in the past a couple weeks ago, and then Mount St. Helens is all fired back up again. So as we've talked about this in the past, Sean, you've talked about during the solar minimum, as solar sun cycles work, as sun activity gets less and less, it does offer the opportunity to see more volcanic activity. Other thing I want to talk about too, as we hit these lows and what we're seeing now, other thing you talked about as well is you talked about here the Glassberg cycle and how that works based around these solar cycles. So Sean, talk about those two things a little bit and your kind of thought process on how that might affect longer term weather patterns outside of just what we see happening in the next couple of months.
When solar activity goes down, the magnetic field strength of the sun drops markedly, and we've seen that. That means that the protective shield that protects the Earth's atmosphere from galactic cosmic rays falls, and more of these highly charged particles bombard our atmosphere, bombard the Earth, and go into the mantle and impact the magnetic field strength of the Earth, which has also fallen dramatically in the last 15 to 20 years. That reduction in magnetic field strength of the Earth weakens and destabilizes the tectonic nature of Earth's activity, increasing the earthquakes on Earth and increasing over time volcanic eruptions on Earth. So we know that every major grand solar cycle or 30 to 40 year period where we've had a period of lower sunspot activity, we've seen an increase in overall volcanic activity and most importantly in large volcanic activity. The time frames, Casey, that these tend to occur is at the bottom of the 11-year solar cycle. Right now we're at the peak, although it's at a lower level than normal, okay? If you looked at when Tonga went off, that was just coming out of the trough of the last 11-year solar cycle within a grand solar cycle minimum. The next minimum, Casey, is going to occur it's going to start in 2028, 2029. Our work, if you look at the solar dynamo of how these 4 magnetic fields on the sun go through constructive and destructive conformations, shows that the next solar cycle after this one, we may see no sunspots or very few sunspots at all, meaning the peak of the next 11-year solar cycle, there may not be many sunspots at all. The last time we had a solar cycle like that where we had very few at the peak was the Maunder minimum. The Dalton, we had 3 low peaks. We didn't actually have a peak that had none, but the way the cycle is setting up, according to our work and work of others, is that the period from 2028 to 2040, there may be almost no sunspots for a decade. It is our view that that window, that period when volcanic activity typically is very, very high because of the lower solar output during a time of overall lower solar output, is when we expect to see the greatest impact from volcanic eruptions, not only in the terms of the number of them, but in terms of the number of large volcanic eruptions. Tonga was an underwater volcano, as we described before, pumping water vapor, a heating agent. We've had a big heating effect, had a big impact to hot weather spikes and drought impacts. The next set of volcanic eruptions are likely to be sulfur dioxide above the ground, a cooling agent, creating much dramatic, colder weather extremes, longer winters, more extreme weather events from that side of the equation. And historically, those have always occurred during incredible reductions in production of global agricultural production, and have been met with significant increase in price. There's some pretty good historical data that shows what prices did during the last 2 grand solar cycles in terms of what wheat prices did and what rice prices did. There's actually written documents of how prices reacted during those times that people have logged in and have figured out. And we saw significant increases in prices during those 2 periods when we got into that what we call peak trough of the grand solar cycle minimum, which is at 2028, 2040 period of time. So while the activity, so I guess getting back to your original question, what's going on now is telling you it's a warning sign of what's to come. I don't think we're going to get anything earth-shattering right now because we're still at the peak of the current cycle, and this one is still halfway up to what it normally is, and that should be enough to keep the activity from being impactful, other than on a local, regional basis, Casey. But just a few years down the line, I think we could have several Tongas, like 2 or 3 Tongas in a 10-year period that are going to be of the above ground variety that could create very significant havoc with global production and prices. And so that would be the period that I would be thinking that this current period of activity, you're not supposed to be active at the solar cycle trough, at the 11-year solar cycle peak. This is a period you're supposed to have quiet activity. But because we've had 2 half peaks from normalcy, we're actually getting activity. So the fact that we're getting activity at the peak of the cycle is telling you, holy shoot, when this cycle goes back down, we're in big trouble on this volcanic eruption scenario. So I view this as a warning sign. Nothing that's going to drive the market next 1 to 2 years because we're going to be coming off of the trough. But I really, really feel it's a warning sign of what is to come later on in this decade and all through the 2030s. It could be really, really, really wild and challenging for weather volatility, cold weather extremes, and obviously for significant upward price volatility that has always been met with these things in the past. So I think that's what the takeaway I would view is that very, very unusual activity at the peak of the 11-year solar cycle.
Anything else you want to make sure we talk about?
Let me just summarize. I stuck flopping on the bottom here, Casey, into the latter part of June, unless geopolitics escalate further, which they could. I don't think Monday was a one-off thing. I think there's more to come. I think there's more to this than that. Absent that, I think we've just flap along the bottom into the latter part of the month. I absolutely am expecting a drier pattern to develop late June into the first part of August. I don't expect extreme heat. What I mean by extreme heat, I'm not expecting a lot of 95 plus 100 degree plus temperatures. I do think we can be above normal. I think in the way the market mentality is right now, if you had a very, very dry July with just above normal temperatures, as bearish as the market is, that's good enough for a respectable rally that the prices could go to levels that would make sense and pencil out for farmers to start making some new crops. As you know, Casey, we were aggressive old crop cash sellers in the peaks in February, March for grains. And so most of our customers are 75% sold on their old crop supplies. So that pretty much is taken care of. And those prices were good. And farmers should be in pretty good shape if they took our advice on that. We're now focused on the new crop. We think we're going to get a opportunity to sell similar, at least similar to what we saw in February and March, but it could be considerably better if we get the right synchronization of weather, trade deals, geopolitics, renewable diesel. Like, I don't know if all those pieces are going to come together, but you can see a scenario where we could get something much, much better than February and March. We'll just have to wait and see how all the pieces come together and how that all plays out. But I absolutely would be expecting to see a counter-seasonal rally from post the 4th of July into the early part of August, something that is usually a down month. I'm expecting that period to be up, despite the fact that the seasonal say down. We're just in a completely opposite trading pattern this year. We were supposed to go down into the first quarter. We went up. We were supposed to go up in the second quarter. We went down. So when you're going against seasonals, don't use seasonals to predict future price. Expect the opposite to occur. And if that pattern continues, we'd expect a rally in July, not a decline in July.
Yeah, for sure. Good. All right, Sean, good stuff as usual. Folks want to reach out to you, get more information about what you're doing at Hackett Financial. It's the easiest
Our
way to
website
do
is
that.
Hackett, Hackett advisors.com. Twitter page at Fairdex11. From time to time, we put some stuff out there that goes over some of our work that those that watch your show might find of interest.
Right on. Sean, appreciate you being on the show. We'll catch you again
Sounds
next
good, Casey.
time.
Thanks so much.
Stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcasts after these messages.
Well, there they are, mocking you. See you next year, loser. That weedy area that's got you thinking, man, I hate that spot. Wish I'd sprayed better. Get the last laugh with a sprayer upgrade from John Deere. Precision upgrades that can increase your sprayer's performance, like ExactApply, advanced nozzles to give you more control at more speeds. It's just one of the many precision upgrades you'll find at johndeere.com. Now, let's see who's laughing.
All right, welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. I got Ryan Steen here from John Deere to talk about Operations Center and all the cool things that are going on with that. Ryan, how you doing today?
Casey, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Doing good, man. Doing real good. Let's talk a little bit about you first. Introduce yourself and how long you've been with John Deere.
Yeah, Casey. So I've been with John Deere for just about 12 years now. Spent some time with different roles with our tractor and sprayer products. Lived out in central Nebraska for a few years supporting our great John Deere dealers in precision ag. And currently I work in our go-to-market space for the Operations Center. So spent a lot of time with Operations Center, JD Link, and really trying to help farmers out there, ag service providers, get the most out of the data that's available to them through that Operations Center tool.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so let's start a little bit of a history lesson here on data management, what that looks like. So basically we started out with what John Deere Office was first, and then you went to Apex, and then now here we are at the Operations Center. So I guess talk a little bit about the evolution of those products.
Yeah, so for that early history at JD Office and Apex, it was really a desktop software that was downloaded and installed on a computer, and your data lived in those platforms. And in the early 2010s, we came out with John Deere Operations Center. So John Deere Operations Center exists as a web-based platform. The data is accessible from any device with an internet connection. So you can get on your laptop, log on to your Operations Center account, get access to your data, download Operations Center Mobile on your cell phone. You can get all that data in a mobile app. So it's really opening up to see your data in real time. And then it also expands out to viewing your equipment and how it functions in real time. So if all the equipment that we've sold for the last decade plus has come with call it JD Link enabled. So it's basically a cell phone that's on the tractor, combine, sprayer, connects to the cloud system, and that allows the data to flow in, but also allows the real-time location to be available. Mm-hmm. Same thing could be put on your tender trucks and grain trucks. So now Operations Center has evolved into this kind of powerhouse logistics app. So you can see your equipment move throughout the year. You get the data to come in real time on your cell phone whenever you need it. That's been a great evolution of the tool. Probably another one, Casey, that's been really helpful for farmers as this tool's evolved to web-based is getting information into hands of people who you farm with. So that might be your agronomist, it might be an ag service provider, but that ability to transfer data back and forth, get access to look at data that can help someone give you advice has been great for our farmers, and making sure they're in that control of who gets to see their data and who gets to help them farm has been really important.
Yeah. Ops Center is it's a really cool tool. Like you just talked about, I've seen everything from, the logistics side of it during harvest and during planting season, some of those kind of things, getting, in larger operations, watching, assets move from one field to the other and trying to, conquer and divide here a little bit when when the weather's coming in and those kind of things and watching how those assets move around makes a big difference in the operation as to how, one, efficient you are, and two, where do you really need your assets at to make things work?
Totally. And we know a lot of farmers have seasonal help that comes in, and every farm, if you go to their operations center, probably has a North 80 or the South 40, and nobody knows what that farm means except for the folks who are farming in there. So to be able to pull it up on an app, see where the equipment's at, maybe even get driving directions to that equipment, it just streamlines communication and helps people kind of get the things done when we really need to be working hard during those busy seasons like harvest, spraying, and planting.
Yep. And that's the one thing too about the field labeling and how important that is inside Ops Center, because all that information is now tied directly back to that circle or to that field or to whatever it is that you're doing. And that information comes across. And I think, it's, again, going back, you look at some bigger operations, those kind of things, and smaller operations where they might have 3 or 4 or 5 circles or 3 or 4 or 5 fields they're working. Everybody knows what those are, right? And they all have some kind of unique name. It's not just 1, 2, 3, 4. There's always something, in there that's uniquely about that. But that information gets tied back to that field.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right. So let's talk a little bit let's walk through the processes, right? So you have 4 different passes a year that you're going to make in any given farming operation. You're going to have a tillage pass, a seed bed prep type of thing. You're going to have a planting pass, application pass, and then you're going to have a harvest pass and maybe another tillage pass in the fall. But as you're looking through those things, walk me through how I'm getting that information in there to get me ready for, the ultimate outcome of did my yield increase or decrease or what happened during my farming year.
Yeah. So when we think about those passes and walking through the year, it's important to have that holistic data set because, we get to the end of the year, we all think about my yield. My yield's my scorecard. You kind of jump to that as the end game, but without knowing the history of what happened in each of those previous passes, it can get kind of hard to know, why did I get the outcome I got? That I want to experiment with a different seed variety, a different tillage pass. Maybe I tried another herbicide mix or an additional pass at some point, or tried fungicide on a certain field or certain subset of a field. So getting those documented and telling that story becomes really important to knowing the outcome in harvest. So when we talk to farmers and you want to get into data, I think the first spot is setting up I'd encourage you to go out to operationscenter.deere.com. It's a completely free tool to use. I think that's an important thing from a data side. There's not a cost associated to it. So when you're setting up your equipment, making sure that documentation is enabled and that you're actually documenting as you're going through the field becomes a important spot, especially in tillage. You'll start with that one that, when that switch is engaged, when you lower that tillage tool into the ground, that we're documenting. And where that becomes important, especially if you're documenting your tillage depth, we can start to see, did we break up hard pan where we wanted to? Did we drive? Maybe you had some of those spots on the headlands where the semis always park at. Are we seeing a good return on that tillage pass there? And just starting our foundation with good seed bed prep. What kind of job did we do? And also document what tool it was done with. So if it was maybe it was a deep ripping tool, maybe it was just field cultivator as we're doing seed bed prep. But you've got that historic record. As we move into the planting portion, this can be an area where we can do it a little more power into the data and analysis side. So in Operations Center, you can go into the setup portion and into products And this allows you to add all of your seed varieties and actually get them labeled ahead of time. So that way, again, that's a big decision point when it comes to yield, and a big purchase decision point at harvest is, what do I want to do this next year? How did my varieties perform? This actually allows us to know where I put a variety at. And then when we get to harvest, we'll talk about analyzing yield by variety. But then putting those varieties in, we try to make this as easy as possible. Because I know the first time, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about data for the first time, it can seem overwhelming.
Yeah.
But if we go into setup, we add those products in, we can actually build out a work plan. And a work plan allows you to, hey, I want to put this field, I want to put these seed varieties, I want to have these auto track lines, send it. And that's automatically going to populate on the tractor when you get into the field. It's going to preload your boundary, preload your guidance lines. It's going to give you the right products, your seeds to choose from. So now I can just go and I just plant. And I'm not worried about at the end of the field trying to finger in each of the individual products. I did that stuff in February or in December. I just don't have to worry about that in April and May.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's laying us a great foundation. We go execute the planning job. We know where we've got our seeds at. We can have the prescriptions sent there from our agronomists if we're farming with prescriptions. If we're changing our seed varieties, all of that stuff can be done through Operations Center and through those folks that you farm with as well.
Yep.
We get into application, kind of the same thing as well. We're adding our products in, we're adding our tank mixes in. It's a great chance also if you work with an ag service provider to get that data brought in. That's one of those sharing elements where, hey, you can get that same data if they're, it's applied with a John Deere sprayer. They likely have it documented. It's going to pull seamlessly in. It's probably a good spot, Casey, that even if it's not John Deere equipment, Operations Center can work with your non-John Deere displays. Most of the major manufacturers, it's listed in Operations Center in our help files, what's all accepted, but almost every major manufacturer is compatible. So it's important to get that good view no matter what you farm with.
Yep. And I think the cool thing too about Op Center is that our Operations Center is that it gives everything from the perspective of what you did along the way, right? How much horsepower you used, how much gallons of fuel you used during those operational periods. If you're using a sprayer and you have a weather station on there, it tells you what the weather, what the situation was at the time. So you can go back and document, did it work good? Did it not work good? Did I spray when it was too windy? Did I push the envelope a little too much, or did I what was too humid? What was the situation that was out there doing those things? And I think as you look at that, again, it comes back to what we're getting ready to go into next is the harvest side of that, is that all that data now sets the stage for, did I win or did I lose? Right. And that's really what it comes into.
And we know we like to get that planting window to that side in maybe a 5 to 10 day spot, but Mother Nature doesn't always cooperate. And you might have some that you planted in the middle of April and the wrong weather hits. Some of those fields might get planted in the 1st of May. And just having that scorecard to go back, this not just in this harvest, but year over year, and know, what did I do in that year? What was that outcome? Same thing for spraying happens all the time, that I got my herbicide down really good right when I wanted to. It rained for a few days. I couldn't get out to the field. I sprayed this one a bit later. Did I notice a weed problem? Can I go back and look at my spray records? All of those things, just to have super robust data for year over year, is really, really important.
Yep. And I think too, when you're looking at the amount of information that you can share, right? And you can share that with whoever you want to share it with, right? I can pick a litany of people and just get that stuff to go to them. But the thing about that is, I don't have to wait till, like the old jump drive days. I don't have to wait till the end of the season and then give somebody a bunch of jump drives and make them figure out what's going on. They're getting that stuff real time, and they can see, you can look at the actual monitor while you're in the cab of, somebody else can view what's going on in that monitor and help you make the adjustments that you need to make to push those things through. So the capabilities of the system is it's all, it's just all encompassing, right? I don't know how else to put it. It's, it's just one of those things where you can see everything that's going on and make every decision in real time and not have to wait. Okay, we did all this stuff. Now let's see what happened. And now we take back and go and try to, corrugate this data somehow and make it all work. And then you can actually see it going live. And I think that's the cool part about Operations Center.
Yeah. And I just think through something I ran into recently in planting, Casey, just to that point of, there was an issue with the planter. Some of the row units were just a little bit off, and we actually caught that in real time but someone else who wasn't necessarily the person who's operating all the time in the tractor didn't see it, was caught on Operations Center Mobile because we could see what was going on with that machine in real time. We're able to get out, make the adjustments. There's a few bearings need to replace, and we're back planting, and we're performing the way we should. So instead of, that case, there was about an hour where we maybe weren't planting perfect, where before it might be a day, 2 days, a week where things aren't quite right, and that starts to add up as you get throughout that planting season and the impacts to our yield.
Yep. All right, let's talk a little about harvest data and the stuff that comes from there. So I remember, going back 20 years where you're just, the different colored charts that come out from yield data and those kind of things. And that was pretty much it, what you had. Now you have multiple layers of data that you can stack onto that harvest data, starting all the way, like you got about all the passes that you did, all the AB lines that you put in there, all the situations you went through, your watering prescriptions, fertilization prescriptions, all those different things that are in there. You see all that data now. So now you're coming back into looking at yield data, and over the years, it's the hot spots that you would see in those maps are starting to kind of level themselves out a little bit, where there's still hot spots and those kind of things, but it's not, a giant batch of red next to a giant batch of green over here, right? So they've kind of leveled themselves out to, you're seeing a lot more yellow across those maps. Operations Center gives you that visibility. So talk a little bit about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think one of the tools we've come out with in the last year or two has been Work Analyzer. Mm-hmm. And if you go into Operations Center, go into Analyze and go to Work Analyzer, this takes you out of the field view and kind of puts you at the top level view to look across your entire farm and break it down by your fields. You can break it down by varieties and break down by equipment. Those are kind of the three big categories we can start slicing the data through. So if I wanted to look at my 2024 harvest, I want to look at how my corn did, I can put those filters on, and it's going to give me a list of all the fields that I had corn in. And right away, I can look at my moisture, my dry yield. I get some of these very high-level numbers come through. So if I just want to start going field by field, I might want to pick on either my highest yield field to see, like, what did I do in this field that I just crushed it? Mm-hmm. Or I want to pick on my bottom field and say, like, why is this one not pulling the weight? It gives you just a great starting point to look at. Because if you click into those and go a layer deeper, it will show you, well, hey, on the North 80, your best field, you actually planted these varieties. Okay, well, I can do that same thing, Casey, and Work Analyzer, go click on varieties and be like, I want to see all the fields that had these top performing varieties. And is this a field thing or is it a variety thing? And I can see, as a farmer now, we're trying to get away from the analysis paralysis of all this data and, hey, here's a few good spots to start looking at. And then we can take you from there into field by field. So now you can start getting into those, called those field maps, and click back through, like, okay, did I do something different in? If it's not a variety thing, is it a calendar thing? If it's not a calendar thing, did I do something different in that field from a herbicide pass or from a fungicide pass? Like, what did I do different there? But we want to give those first few hitters of total field performance, variety performance, and then you can drill down and actually look at those subsequent passes that happen, or not subsequent, but those previous passes that happen in the field. Yep.
And it goes back to, again, you talk about like soil analysis and those kind of things, like what kind of soil are you planting into? Again, you can log all that stuff inside Operations Center, and it just gives you that baseline of this. I planted this into this kind of soil, and I got this, and this was what I did, and I did something different over here. And like you said, you can go back and compare that data to where you can see all the finer points of what you did or didn't do right.
Yeah, and if you're looking at, say it's this last harvest be 2024, maybe if I'm on an every other year rotation, I want to go look at 2022. Like, was it the same layout the last time this field was in corn, or was it different? Or if I'm on a corn on corn rotation year before, what happened? You can really start to look at it. Do I have some things where I just have, and this always happens, some of the fields are just better. They just perform better, but we can start to filter that noise out and use the real data to ultimately drive your decisions on what you do the next year and maybe what practices you'd consider adopting or which ones maybe aren't pulling their weight.
Yep. So one other cool thing about Operations Center is that the machine analyzer that comes in there.
Yeah.
So not only do you get to take your field data that you have everything, you also get to take your machine data and put in there. So you look at how many hours you're at idle, how many hours you're at work, what percentage of horsepower are you using. You start looking at your sprayers, how much road time did you have on that sprayer versus spray time versus hour time, engine hour time. You start taking all these different things into consideration. It starts laying the groundwork for, do I have enough horsepower? Do I have too much horsepower?
Yeah.
Do I need an extra sprayer, an extra combine? You start looking at all these different, indicators out there that show what's going on. I guess talk a little bit about that and how you see people using that.
Yeah, so I think the things we talked through this point, Casey, we're thinking about return on investment and a lot of agronomic conversations. Just great way to get your data in. We were looking at machine performance, but it's kind of that return on investment from your agronomic practices. The same thing holds true on equipment. We want to make sure that the investment that our customers make, especially in John Deere equipment, is paying them a dividend, that they're seeing that, hey, I'm getting what I paid for when I bought John Deere equipment. Something we've recently brought into Operations Center is the ability to make sure you're maintaining your historic view on all your equipment. So if what happens a lot of times is you might get a new combine, but I want to look and see exactly how I performed on the old one. So what we've done is kind of have the ability to stack those right next to each other. So if you had, maybe you run a S780 combine before and I was running an S670 previously, I can stack those up, and am I getting better throughput? Am I covering more acres in a day? And that's in that work analyzer portion, is giving you that real specific, this is what that machine is doing for getting acres covered, getting corn brought through the combine, and the same things that you talk through. We find all the time, we call operational inefficiency. My combine's sitting grain tank full, not unloading, not harvesting.
Right.
And when we're breaking it down to that level, and that's kind of the worst case scenario for a combine is, I got a full grain tank, I'm not harvesting, I'm not unloading, I'm waiting on a truck. That's the code for that one.
Yep.
But just even opening that door up of, if you had another truck, you could keep this combine moving a bit more. There's a big flashlight to shine on the harvest job for a farmer, and it comes down to, we're analyzing what's happening on the equipment and trying to surface those insights for farmers every day.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's from the dealership perspective, I used to spend time with my customers and going through that and let's take a look at what you did. And then, you talk about specific specs, like how many hours did you use Combine Advisor, for example, right, on your combine? How many hours did you use See & Spray? How many hours did you go through all those different specs? It lets you know, you paid all this money for this. Let's make sure you're using it. And are you utilizing it? And did it make a difference in your operation?
Totally. Even basic things like, if I'm using AutoTrack, do I have it engaged? Am I using it? It lets you look, especially if you have, multiple folks who are operating equipment throughout the year. If you're not always the one who has that's in the seat, being able to see what other people have been doing in your equipment and making sure that that's driving the return and the job quality you want is very, very important.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of times where I use an example where, you see a tractor and it had 1,000 hours on it, for example. And this particular example I'm thinking of in my head right now, there was 1,000 hours on it and 400 of them were at work. The other 600 hours are at idle. So I asked that question, it could have been a number of things, right? It could have had, the PTO was engaged and we were running an auger or something like that. But this one was just sitting there with no PTO engaged. So I'm like, what was, did you mean for this to happen? And it was basically, it was just idle. They would jump in and out of it all day. They would go use it, jumping in and out, and during harvest and during planting season. And next thing you know, you had 600 hours of it that sat there at idle. And the bad thing about that is those 600 hours cost the same as the 400 hours that you actually used it.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part about something like that. So
definitely,
for sure.
It's not always even just the fuel consumption side of it at idle. It's that depreciation on equipment and what it's actually cost you for sure.
One of the real cool things about Operations Center too is that it does have a mobile function to it. So you can use your cell phone when you're out there, use their app and go out through there and get the same functionality that you would see on your desktop. So I guess talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, I think Operations Center Mobile, especially in the last few years, there's very few things that you can do on the desktop function or the web-based browser area that you can't just do in Operations Center Mobile, especially when the season gets going. I don't know a lot of farmers who spend a whole lot of time sitting at the computer looking at their farm, but everybody has a phone. everybody can get it out and take a look at what's going on in the farm and during the season. So everything that we've talked through today is accessible on the mobile app, even down to adding your products, developing a work plan, sending it to equipment. All of that can just happen from Operations Center Mobile. So if there's one thing, if maybe you've used data before, even if you hadn't, Operations Center Mobile is again one of those free things that's incredibly powerful. We talked a little bit about logistics too. So even if you have seasonal help who's coming out to the farm, maybe they're not familiar with your farm operation, where fields are at, this is a tool that if I know what field I want to go to, or even get to the combine, I can go on the phone, touch the combine, hit directions, and it will pop up Apple or Google Map directions to that combine. So regardless of how much experience you have or your help has, or maybe it's somebody else on the farm, maybe you just want to get lunch brought out to you during the middle of the day, it can provide that level of detail, and you can get kind of grant access to your farm to folks to be able to get even just that basic location and field type information if that's pivotal to you getting the job done.
Yeah, for sure. Well, definitely Operations Center has so many different functionalities and so many different tools that you can put towards the gaining those efficiencies on the farm that everyone's looking for. And it's, again, it's free. So there's no reason not to use it.
And, the Operations Center Mobile area we talked through, and one of the things at the front end was putting JD Link connectivity on vehicles that we wouldn't normally think about it. So maybe it's your pickup truck, your grain truck, a tender vehicle. That's been really powerful on just location information, knowing where things are at. Even there's put alerts on those vehicles. So if you don't want somebody driving 80 miles an hour in your farm pickup truck, you can have an alert program to ping you when that happens. It's a really powerful tool for a farmer to sit back and really have control and view of their entire farm. And everything that's on the farm is represented in Operations Center, and becomes a very powerful tool when that happens.
Very much so. All right, Ryan. Well, if folks want to get more information about Operations Center, what's the easiest place to do that at?
Yeah, I'd go to, first off, operationscenter.deere.com is the site for it. You can create an account for free. Check it out. There's great help files on that. So if you're navigating through it, just dive into the tool. It's the best way to learn it and get experience. On YouTube, we have on our John Deere YouTube page, there's a full series of videos that walk through the functions of Operations Center and provide fantastic how-to information. So anything that we've talked about today I guarantee you'll find it in that John Deere YouTube portion in the playlist for Operations Center, and can walk through the details and help you get set up and running with Operations Center. And the last thing is probably the most important one, is reach out to your local John Deere dealer. We got great experts at our dealer network that are excited about the tool, are excited to help you engage with it, and get the most out of your John Deere or just all of your equipment and your farm.
Right on. Well, Ryan, appreciate you being on the podcast. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, appreciate it, Casey. It's fun.
Right on. Stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcast after these messages. Mark your calendars for the 2025 Moving Iron Summit, September 24th through the 26th in Austin, Texas. We'll dig into what's happening in the used equipment market and how dealers are adjusting. It's a chance to connect with others in the industry, share what's working, and get a better handle on what's ahead. You want to be part of the 2025 Summit? Visit movingironllc.com for all the info. All right, welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. Got Aaron Findle back here to talk about what's going on in the world of equipment. Aaron, how you doing this morning?
Good, and yourself, my man?
Doing good. So we do this show about once a year. We talk about support equipment, and as you look at the grain handling side of stuff, as we're kind of in that the throes of wheat harvest here, as you look at what's going on in North Texas and South Oklahoma. I spent 4 days doing a crop tour in Kansas on gravel roads, looking at all the wheat that's out there, and still I got quite a ways to go. Yeah, typically they don't start cutting hair down there until about mid-June, into June, something like that. So, and it was there. So it was a cool opportunity to do that. But it was, as you, that was like I'm just kidding about the crop tour thing. I was doing a walk on the, a kind of a pilgrimage walk, I guess, for a Father Capon there that was a chaplain in the Korean War, and they do it every year. It's a 60-mile walk, but we walked every gravel road between basically Bel Air, Kansas, all the way to Pilsen, Kansas, and it was there's a lot of wheat to look at. And the cool thing about that, I missed, because living out here in the Panhandle versus living out there with the actual legit hedgerows that you saw, right? They're actual hedge trees,
Right.
And with the hedgerows, and it was cool to go back and see that again. So,
and the humidity.
Yeah, luckily there was so much humidity on the morning that we started. It was actually raining, so it was a nice little start of the day. But then we got some of the Kansas heat there as the tail end of that walk. So
you have to breathe with a spoon.
Yeah, I remembered quickly why humidity sucks as things carried on.
That is very cool that you did that, though. As a side note, very neat deal.
Yeah, very cool experience for me. Glad we had a chance to do it. So, been something I've been wanting to do for a long time. So, looking forward to do it again next year. It was a cool experience. So, it was. But that being said, walking through the start of the Flint Hills of Kansas, you don't see a lot of stuff other than wheat. And I saw some really old grain carts and augers and those kind of things sitting out in the hedgerow, and it was cool to see that stuff. And I think that's today's topic as we go through what we're looking at.
Real quick, I'll just say, having a BFF that's a big time machinery geek, and I don't know, being passing these things on foot. For sure, slow enough to, I don't know, maybe get a picture and send it to a guy. That'd have been a nice touch. But I guess if you're walking 60 miles, you're too busy to take pictures of old cool stuff. But whatever.
I saw a guy who had a John Deere 25 combine sitting in his front yard.
Ooh,
and it was actually in decent shape. I mean,
I
for
bet.
what it was.
Well, yeah, if it's a lawn ornament,
Had two of them. And I was like, wow, look at that. And of course, the guy I was walking with, I was like, man, look at this thing over here. This old John Deere pull type combine. He's like, okay, yeah. I'm like, all right. he didn't have the same cool desire in his heart for the old combine that I did, but I thought it was neat looking at it.
Now you know how I feel all day, every day. See.
Yeah, true. Especially another thing, being in that part of the world, I saw a lot of old Kraus discs.
Oh, that's a shock.
I mean, that's something too. Like, I was looking around going, like, it took me a minute to remember, like the red with the
yellow, with the tan or yellow.
It started out yellow, but it faded into over the years into a tan color. And I'm like, that's a Kraus. And so I started looking at it and saw that. So that was a cool thing too. But I think as you look at some of that old stuff as you're walking around, the thing about the farm equipment industry, it is so slotted into areas where you'll see certain kinds of equipment that are of a certain age, right?
Oh, yeah.
That specific part of Kansas where I was walking through is not necessarily the, hey, let's go out and flip our fleet every year, right?
No.
It's like, hey, let's go out and flip our disc every 30 years.
Right.
We've put this is our 6th set of gangs that we put on.
I was just going to say, we only reblade it 4 times and then we trade.
So, and I think that's the cool thing about farming, the equipment side of the business, is that,
right.
You talk to a lot of dealers across the country and they're all segmented, right? You've got every group has got they've got their new buyers and their 1 and 2 year old buyers, so on and so forth, as those things kind of work down. But I think those are at varying degrees of the levels that you see happening, right? And I think that's as a used equipment guy and as a buyer of used equipment, those are things you need to pay attention to in your area to make sure you understand what it is, because more than likely, whatever you have at your farm, your neighbors around you have something similar to that, right? Now, it may be newer, it may be older, but it's going to be, hey, we have 30-foot discs in this area. That's what we use, 30-foot discs, right?
Right.
Screw your VTs. We're not doing anything with the VTs, right? We're not doing that. We're not doing everything else. We have good old-fashioned conventional disc tillage discs that we're going to go out and use every year, and that's what we're going to do.
Right.
And
well, like us, for instance, out here, 30 plus.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yep.
We pulled 12 rows with 370s. We could do it with like a 6M, but they make 370s and we have 5 of them. So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
what we use.
And that's the other thing too, is like, like in our area, out here in the Panhandle, when you're looking at the support equipment and tillage equipment, those kind of things that go along with that, we're wide open country, right? And it's all pivots and those kind of things, but it's still wide open, right? You're not going to have you have some wipers out there, where they're going to do, 3/4 of a circle or a half a circle or something like that, because there's a house there or whatever, that it kind of gets in the way. But for the most part, it's 120 to 160 acre pivots, right? And that's what you got set up out there.
Yep.
Well, I forget, as you walk through the thing, and I made a joke to guy. Yes, of course, he didn't get the joke either when I made it. It was like, I didn't realize they made square pivots, because there was, this regular, here's a mile section, here's your 640 section, acre section of wheat, right? And I'm like, look at that. That's just, now of course I was all squared up, you don't have to worry about, there's no corners, and all that kind of stuff, you're just looking at it as it goes, and which then changes the philosophy of how you farm. Now, that being said,
there's no switch to make the rain come.
No, no, exactly. And the other side of that too was the thing I forgot about being gone for so long and just kind of having to go back through remember is that, okay, here's your 640 full section of wheat, right? Well, then you right across the road is the old 1930s CWP projects where they'd come in and put the hedgerows in to stop the erosion.
Oh, right.
And so this guy's got his 40 acres with, that's correct, but one guy owns it all, right? But there's this, here's a 40 acre section that's hedgerowed in, and then here's a 160 acres that's hedgerowed in, and here's another over here's a 320 over, so you start doing all the math on that, and you start looking at those fields, and I'm like, it changes the way some people address the farm. Now, in those particular areas like that, you're still going to use, big equipment to go get things done because you're not so much concerned about what it looks like, and you're navigating the roads and those kind of things. But
you're going to buy the equipment for the 320, not that 40.
Right, exactly. And it was just it was a cool reminder of the area that I grew up in, and looking at how those variants come in, and you start looking at that. So kind of back to what we talked about. So out here, I sold as many 35 to 40 foot discs, 45 foot discs, VTs, those kind of things, as I have sold back when I was in Kansas, that I sold that were 25 to 35 foot discs, right? And that all comes back down to horsepower and the field size that you're using. Out here, if there's a tree line, you admire that because wow, somebody took time to plant trees.
They must have planted that.
They had to have done that. There's no way that this is natural, right?
Right.
And back in Kansas, it could have planted it that way, or they could have just cleared out all the trees except for that one strip.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And that's the kind of the thought process that behind it, which then comes into a whole nother level of things like out here, you see a lot of guys that go and roll through their field with rock pickers before they plant every year, and there's always a big pile of rocks somewhere at the front or the end of you can see where they've done it year over year where they've dumped these rocks. When you get to Kansas, when you start getting over into the Flint Hills, you see some of that, but it's kind of like there's a hard line there where, all right, this side of the road is still agricultural country. This side of the road over here,
grass.
This is grass. This is cattle country.
Right.
It's that split is really defining. And I think when you look at your area and you're wanting to buy something, I think the point I'm making here is that you need to pay attention to what it is that you need for your farm, and you're going to be limited to what the used equipment space looks like in your surrounding area. Now, more than likely, that's what you're going to need anyway. But if you're looking for something outside of the normal, right, you're going to have to start using internet and those kind of things to go out and source those things. And from a dealership perspective, being conscious of, all right, we have all these whatever's coming in, right? We do every year. How many of them can we actually, how many buyers do we have set up for them, which then dictates the market and what, for that specific area, do you have a supply or demand issue? And whichever one you have is going to dictate the price of that piece of equipment.
Well, and there too, you know, on the dealer side, for instance, everything out here is 30 plus. Well, you know, I trade for a 25-foot VT out of Iowa, Illinois, you know, and he gets a 40 and we swap him on the old interstate. I am really excited about that. It's something different.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Then did you call about the 33 or 35 footer? Which one? I got 6 of each.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
It's a different customer. It's a whole different, usually like, you know, how we letter A plus and A, and it's a different customer altogether, typically. And it is going to a different area. You know that. Right. The chances of that 25-foot VT selling around Cheyenne, Wells, Colorado are pretty slim unless it's a smaller outfit. Right. You know? So on the dealer side, what I like about that is trying to always be dialed in enough to know exactly where that thing's going back to.
Right.
Yeah, it came out of Illinois, okay, because we had a really nice 40, gorgeous 40-footer. It was worth it to that guy to look away from home, get this one. Now I got this sweet little 10-year-old 25-footer, and I bet somebody will say around Columbus will call. Yep, there it went. You know, that is what I really enjoy on the dealer side. Always trying to be, you know, I've traded for things in the last 20 years that, and you know, that raises eyebrows. And what are you doing? What are you going to do with that? It's called the internet. Watch this. Boom. Yep. You know, come out of California, went to Tennessee. There we go. Yep. Handled.
Yep. And I think that's
you know, to your point, that's where, you know, that guy in South Central Kansas is sitting there and, well, I need this, but there just aren't any around. Bam.
Yeah.
30 seconds later, he found 20 of them.
Yeah. And that's the power of the internet too, right? So you have to be conscious of that when you're looking at, because it's not, I think some people get stuck in a, hey, well, this is what we've got to sell. Right. And, or, hey, this is what we got. This is our choice to buy. And there are some maneuvering issues that you have to do when you buy, especially support equipment on the internet, especially when you start looking at tillage. I mean, depending on what you're buying, you might have to break that thing down into, you know, into multiple pieces and this, that, and other thing and blah, blah, blah. And
when you come into that, you need to be working with a dealer who knows what the hell they're doing.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. That understands, that has a trucking outfit that understands what it is too. Right. And I mean, that's why I've been such a big fan of Valley Transportation for so long. Right. When you're talking with them, you call them up and say, hey, I've got a whatever, right? You tell them and they're, okay, yep. Okay. I need you to do X, Y, and Z, and we'll be able to get it on the trailer.
Well, not only that, but you know, you could have one at one dealer that, yeah, I think we could figure out how to get that loaded. And you call the other dealer and, yep, we done 5 of them that way. Know just how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's 400 extra on tear down and this and load, and here we go.
Yeah. Yep. And it's, when you start looking at,
because the internet has done that on the dealer side, a lot of dealers should be in that position now.
Yeah.
You know, where stuff's gone all over and yep, we know, and you bet, and here we go. And it's just, that's the way it works, you know?
Yeah.
You know, I take most of the out of area calls for the dealership, and it's always so funny to me. You get a, 712 Western Iowa, just in the next state. Now, granted, that's 500 miles away, but it's just the next state. Well, I'm clear over in Iowa, and you're like, wow, that's close this week.
Yeah.
You know, we had We had a truck going to Maryland, one to Georgia, and one to Nevada last week. So Iowa, we can do.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what's it's made it so much more feasible to achieve whatever you need to in the equipment space.
Yeah.
You know, to your point, support equipment, grain carts.
Yeah.
Grain carts are, everybody's got at least one, you know, in the world we're in. And they are always such a regional hit, you know, and you could be even, I wouldn't say splitting counties, but you could split a state almost by counties. You know, this, even amongst our stores, well, these guys really like J&M. These guys really like Brent. These guys really like Brand. You know, over here's a big Kinsey pocket. So you're sitting there in southern Indiana and, oh my gosh, look at this awesome Kinsey grain cart in Idaho or something.
Right.
You know, it makes the, and to your point, Casey, when talking about support equipment, there's always less of that, well, you didn't buy it here, for both parties.
Yeah.
It's a grain cart, a disc, you know, that. The combine and the tractor, that's where, you know.
Yeah.
Well, Huscom, you didn't call me, you know, that kind of deal. That's where those discussions happen. Very rarely does that happen on a piece of tillage or an auger, grain cart, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the specialization of some of that stuff too is what kind of may or may not allow, because, you know, tillage is a good example of that, dude. Tillage is like it feels like it's the 5-year fad thing, you know, like every 5 years there's a new tillage piece that comes out that just is going to change the way people farm.
High speed discs are already, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
That was it. That was the answer.
Yep.
Here we go. It's like a VT, but it's also like a disc, and it goes fast.
Right. The idea behind that was here's some of the thought processes where they were like, well, yeah, we'll be able to go behind the combine now at a better rate of speed. Like, well, you're going faster than the combine. So, you know what I mean? Like you have to like give it 2 day a combine, a 2 day head start. So you can have time to, you know, have time to work. So as I'm looking through this, you know, you look at like, I think the things that you need to pay attention to buy locally as much as you possibly can, especially on the used side. Used augers to me I think there's good opportunity to buy used augers, but the thing you have to remember about a used auger, and this has been my kind of, I guess, theory, and also seen it happen in practice quite a bit. No one trades in an auger on another auger if their auger they have is still in good shape, right? They
do. They put up a new bin, old auger won't reach. They change augers.
I know, yeah.
In a scenario where nothing on their farm changed and they're trading augers,
yeah, right,
it's worn out.
Yeah, you're right. So when you're looking at the change, you get a bigger bin or something like that, you need to go from a 90-foot auger to a 120-foot auger or something like that. That changes the scenario quite a bit. But like again, if nothing's changed on their farm, it's, you know, they're augering grapefruits at that point. You know what I mean? So.
The other thing would be diameter change.
Sure.
You know, there's still a lot of guys that have a 10
here
and there. So my thought process is the smaller it is, diameter, length, the better it is. Until you get under 50 foot, and then that auger has unloaded every bushel on the farm.
Right.
So, you know, I thought of that stupid, you know, I'm not even, I would be what I call a Z customer.
If you're lucky.
If I'm lucky. Yeah. I'm the cleanup guy on the online auctions. That's how bad I am.
You're the AA farmer on the spreadsheet, dude. That's you know what I mean?
A whole other sheet. Sheet 2. But, you know, case in point, I have, for my little operation, I buy corn because I feed it. Well, and I have 2 places. I have 3 augers. They're excellent augers because they're 8 by 60 foot. Nobody in production ag uses an 8-inch auger anymore.
Right.
And to me, it's like, wow, look how quick that was.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
I'm unloading 300 bushel once every couple months, you know, 5 times. Those guys are doing 1,000 bushel every couple minutes.
Right.
So, little different.
Yeah.
And that's, to your point, in my days selling local, I sold a handful of, there you go, 8-inch or 10-inch augers to ranchers.
Yeah.
To fill cake bins.
Yep.
Same thing I'm doing with corn. You know, they still have a life.
Right.
I know a lot of guys in, back east too, if where they're doing it allows for it, they'll use that same auger and they'll just load out with a 60-footer, a 70-footer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. And I think that's the, so I think what we're both saying here is that really take a hard look at what your needs are and take a look at what you have locally, and then take a look at what you have on the internet, because both of those things are gonna help you supply what you need to. Now, that being said, I don't know that I would go 2 states away to buy an auger. I'm going to tell you this. I've sold augers, I've bought augers, I've pulled augers all over. $3 hours to go to the auger means usually 6 hours to come home. That's a full day. That's about as far out as you want to go. Right.
Augers are not well, can we tear it down and load it? You can. Augers don't cost enough to justify that, and you just bought your auger twice, whereas you could have went to town over in Indiana and bought a new one.
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
You know, so some things, everything can move. You know, nothing is manufactured on site in the equipment business. It all comes to the dealership from somewhere. Mm-hmm. But there comes a point where tear down just don't work.
Right. Yep. And I think that's the juice worth the squeeze scenario.
Yep.
That's
there you go.
Too, so.
The favorite saying.
Yeah, that's right. All right, man. Kind of a good place to stop. Folks want to reach out to you and get more information about what you're doing. What's the easiest way to do that?
You can call me, text me, 308-760-1193. You can send me an email, afintel@21equip.com. And I am fairly active on the Twitter or X and Facebook.
Right on. Casey Seymour, you can find me on Facebook, X, Instagram, all over, any place. Just go to Moving Iron LLC, and at the handle or Moving Iron Podcast, you can find me there, and I'm happy to answer whatever question you might have, or just jump in on a conversation with you. So check that out. Go to AgWeb, and you can see listen to the audio version of this podcast. You can also go to Farm Journal's YouTube channel, and you can see the video version of this podcast, and you can see all the good stuff that comes with that. Moving Iron Summit's coming up here in Austin, Tennessee. What am I talking about? Austin, Texas. Wow.
It's right down the road from Nashville, Texas.
There might be an Austin, Tennessee. But Austin, Texas, September 24th through 26th. Registration's open for that. So if you're interested in doing that, check that out. Have a good lineup of stuff coming out there. Should start seeing some information roll out about some speakers and whatnot that are there that are going to be available. So check that out. And it'll be a good time as usual. So with that, I'm Casey Seymour. I want to say special thanks to Sean Hackett, Greg Peterson, and Aaron Pendle for being on this podcast. So with that, have a good day. Let's go some iron, folks. Out.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week. And remember, Moving Iron is available on Farm Journal's YouTube channel and anywhere podcasts are found. So until next time, let's move some iron.